Thank you, Sally. And yes, I probably would not have made that announcement, but thanks. Yeah, for any of you that feel comfortable so to do that, would be great. I'd love to see you, but I also understand if that's not comfortable to you. So no worries. Well, good morning, everybody. Really good to see you. And I do have some announcements before we dive into our teaching, which is rich, and we don't want to shortchange that at all. First and foremost, she's already spoken a little bit earlier today about a joy for herself, but I want to share a joy about Julie Peterson. Darn it. So yeah, you know what I'm going to say, Julie. So Julie, our dear sister in Christ, is being baptized this Sunday at 9:30. And I just am so thrilled that this will be pretty much one of my last pastoral acts at Lake Grove. And I can't think of someone that I would rather be standing with. So I hope that you'll stand with her as well in prayer. And if you're present, you'll be able to witness it, but you can also witness online too. So hope that you'll be there. If not, please remember her in your prayers. Yay. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about Bible study going forward. That's a good topic. Number one, this is our last study in our current series, and we had a planned break anyway, so that actually has worked out well. We're going to take a break until December 1st, and that'll give you a chance to fully involve yourself in the Thanksgiving holiday and so forth. So again, this is the last study until December 1st. On December 1st, we'll come back with an Advent Bible study, just a 3-week study, and it will be entitled While We Wait, which of course is the theme of Advent, is waiting. But it will be a great study of 3 women, biblical characters, Anna, Elizabeth, and Mary, and we'll be exploring how they waited and how we should wait during this Advent season. It's a wonderful idea that I want to credit. Karen Prgodich came up with this great idea. Yay, Karen. And so Karen, along with pastors Susan and Lillian, will all be teaching one of the segments of this 3-week series. So December 1, 8, and 15. And hope you'll participate in that. And then there'll be a little break for Christmas and then back after the first of the year. During this time, I think I explained last week, and for those of you that didn't hear that, the church, Lake Grove, is in the process of searching for an interim associate pastor who will step into my responsibilities while they search. And our dear Linda is a part of that search team. And there are many others that are a part of that. We'll have some wonderful bridging leadership, and I've already mentioned her by name. Our dear Karen Prgodich is going to be bridging this time. She has I know, isn't that great? I see the applause, yay. Karen, of course, has deep relationships with all of you, but also with my other regular, once a week teaching opportunity, which is Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, which is our adult Sunday school class. So she was a natural, not only for being in both places at once, but with her natural gifts and talents. So please remember her in your prayers as she helps bridge us through this time and kind of coordinates these 2 teaching opportunities. Any of my pastoral responsibilities, pastoral care and that sort of thing, I would just direct you to my wonderful colleagues, Pastor Susan, Pastor Lillian, I have to get the roll call out, Pastor Greg, Pastor Mark. I mean, they're all available to you. And I know that they would be so delighted to be of service to you. Okay. Bible study during this interim time, until we have an interim in place, will remain online. Okay. All of our, teaching programs will remain online until the interim pastor has a chance to get his or her feet underneath them. And then we'll see where the numbers are. I think it's kind of the way that we've been rolling for the last year and a half plus. We're waiting on the numbers to be at a place where everyone's comfortable to be back together. So please just be watching. Brian is always your go-to, my assistant, if there's anything that you need. So please take advantage of that. And then last but not least, I want to again speak to something I spoke about last week, which is our women's Advent gathering. We just feel like we want to exercise caution again this year and not have the dessert portion of our annual Women's Advent dessert. However, we don't want to forego being together for yet another year. That just didn't seem humane. I mean, this is a season made to be together and to rejoice in our Savior. So we are retitling it for this year only the Women's Advent Gathering, and we'll be together on our regular Friday, the first Friday of December, the 3rd at 7:00 in the sanctuary. We have special music from Olivia Potoff, and she was our last musician right before we closed down a couple months later. Also, we'll have carols singing, regular carols this season, and Pastor Susan is going to do our meditation this year. So really exciting. We'll have some narration, and it'll be great. Now, you can be involved, though, if you'd like. While we're not decorating tables in the fellowship hall and having dessert, we do want to decorate the gathering area so that when women enter this space, they'll be captivated by the beauty. So we're not looking for anything fancy, just something that would be appealing to the eye. And I think most of you have seen those little cafe tables that we use at the back of the fellowship hall. We're going to set out a row of cafe tables on either side of the gathering area as people enter, and invite any of you that would like, just either individually, or you can go in together with 2 or 3 of you and decorate a table. I would encourage lots of light and, just things that will be delightful to our eyes. And if you would like to decorate a table, would you just reach out to me or to Brian via email and let us know? And I just think it'll be a lovely evening together. Please come. There's no tickets, no cost. Just come. Come and enjoy. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, lest you think that I'm being paid for infomercials, I think I'm done with my announcements. So. Well, friends, here we are. We are at the final study of our, what I agree with my dear Sally. It has just been a great study. Be Still and Know, a study of rest and refuge. And we have traveled far these last many weeks, but the message has really been the same. And that is that God, who is with us, is our refuge, no matter what storms we may encounter in life. And we see that most clearly in the person and work of our Lord Jesus Christ, how he interacted with people in the midst of storms and brought help and hope and healing. And so it is really my joy to end our study today with this wonderful figure of Mary Magdalene, and reflect on the storm of sorrow of Mary Magdalene after the crucifixion, death, and burial of Jesus. So if you'd indulge me once more, let's look to the Lord and ask for the illumination of the Holy Spirit as we liberally dig into the Word today. I hope you have your Bibles handy because we're going to travel. So let's pray. Oh, Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on us. Give us insight, not just to fill our heads, but to expand our hearts, that we may love you and follow you more closely each and every day. We ask it in the name of Jesus, our precious Lord and Savior. Amen. Okie doke. Mary Magdalene. Let's talk a little bit about Mary Magdalene. The background that you and I bring to this study really colors how we view Mary Magdalene. I would like for you just to take a moment before we even jump into the Word and do a little reflecting on what you bring with you today to this study in terms of your impressions of Mary Magdalene. Would you just take your pen and maybe on the side margin, would you take a second and jot down everything that you remember, every impression that you have had of Mary Magdalene from previous Bible studies, maybe some readings you've done on your own and or sermons, but just a very few moments and jot those thoughts down. Let's get them on paper and see what we bring with us. Ready, set, go. Okay, it looks like some of you are still jotting, but hopefully you've a couple of thoughts at least about Mary Magdalene. First, let's jump in and talk a little bit about her name. Magdalene is not her last name. Can I just disabuse you of that notion? Her name, Mary of Magdala, would be more to the point. Magdala was her hometown, her village, if you will. Magdala was a village on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. It was an ancient fishing village about 3 miles north of Tiberias. If you have a map in your Bible at the back, maybe you can take a look, see where that would be located. But that's a geographical reference. It's Mary of Magdala. So Mary, as you may remember, is mentioned in all 4 of the Gospels as a witness of the crucifixion and the empty tomb of Jesus. In Matthew and John, she also encounters the resurrected Jesus. So let's begin by just taking a look-see, doing a little survey of the places where we discover Mary. If you would turn with me to the first mention of her, and that's in Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. I should mention that this is the first time outside of the death and resurrection narratives where we encounter Mary, is in Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. We discover there that she is one of several women who travel with Jesus as one of his disciples throughout Galilee. So let's dive in at Luke chapter 8, verses 1 through 3, and see what we can discover about Mary. Listen for God to speak. Soon afterwards, Jesus went on through cities and villages, proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, so the disciples, as well as some women who had been cured of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward Chuza, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their resources. Those 3 verses tell us so very much. We learn, don't we, in one fell swoop, that 7 demons had been cast out of Mary Magdalene. Now, we don't know if this was a way of shorthanding that she was gravely ill in a physical sense, or if indeed she had, 7 demons, literal demon possession, cast out from her. But what we do know, which is probably even more significant than exactly what she was healed of, was that she was healed. She was healed by Jesus. And she followed Jesus as a disciple. And really importantly, she provided for Jesus and the disciples out of her own resources, along with some other women. But what's really significant about this, and I want to make sure you kind of get your heads and hearts wrapped around this, is that these women were independent, capable, and so could supply for Jesus and the disciples out of their own resources. So here from the beginning of Jesus's ministry, we see women playing a really critical role in the ministry of Jesus. So we should really be encouraged by that. That's really pretty significant, that women were so prominent right from the very beginning of Jesus's ministry. The reason I say that is that over the years, some, usually men, unfortunately, have argued that the women played just simply a supportive role, not a leadership role. But what I want to tell you is that in the ancient world, the ability to support others from one's resources was indicative of a leadership role and demonstrated competence, independence, and resourcefulness. So that's significant. And it is super significant that from the very beginning, we have women, not just the 12, there's a cast of many that are following Jesus at this point, right? And prominent among them as his disciples were women. So let's tuck that nugget away. What's unfortunate as we learn and glean more about Mary Magdalene in this text is that so often historically, Mary has been linked to the narrative that just precedes what I just read. If you go back to chapter 7 at verse 36, so take a look, see there. In my Bible, the header is "A Sinful Woman Forgiven." Oh my. So we can almost immediately see how over time, Mary Magdalene has been linked to this story. Now, I want to emphasize to you, there is no evidence for that. It's all kind of a traditional spin that some have placed on this. Is it possible? Maybe, but it doesn't necessarily seem probable. So you'll remember this story of the sinful woman who's forgiven. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have supper with him. So he goes to the Pharisee's house, and there's verse 37, and a woman in the city who was a sinner, having learned that he was eating in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster jar of ointment, and she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, and began to bathe his feet with her tears and to dry them with her hair. Then she continued kissing his feet and anointing them with the ointment. And anyway, you probably know the story. It goes on from there, where the Pharisees, of course, are scandalized by this. And there's an allusion to the fact that she's a sinner. And historically, there's a leap that's made that indeed she's a prostitute. And anyway, it goes from there. And it's a beautiful little parable and so forth. But what I want to really challenge us to think about is how this narrative, because of proximity to the introduction of Mary Magdalene, has actually become somewhat iconic in the minds of some to actually be speaking of Mary Magdalene. And so I encourage you to do this actually. If you go into Google Images or anything like that and Google Mary Magdalene in art or artwork, it is just stunning how often she is depicted as a prostitute or a woman of ill repute. The paintings, many of them are sexually seductive. It's really kind of amazing. And again, the reason I go into this much backstory is to say there's no evidence for that. It's all by kind of tradition and illusion that's been passed along. And again, I think this falls into the category of we don't know. And I think it's kind of a quantum leap that personally I don't think is warranted. Is she a forgiven sinner like all the rest of us? Of course. Is she grateful? Well, obviously, because she's supporting Jesus with her physical support as well as her financial resources. But anyway, the point I'm really trying to make is that if we remember Mary Magdalene for anything, it should be as a faithful disciple of Jesus, not as a woman of, ill repute or, questionable behavior. She was someone who was healed by Jesus and who was very grateful for that. And it was life-changing. So anyway, hopefully that's enough. But I did feel a need to stop off there, because if you look at Jesus Christ Superstar, some of our, cultural iconic shows, if you look at Da Vinci Code, and again, how Mary Magdalene is depicted in art, whoa, you come up with a different impression of who she really was. And I want to disabuse you of that. I want you to remember her as a disciple, a follower of Jesus. Okay. So let's look at some of the other passages where we find Mary. And again, this is what we've just looked at is the only reference in the ministry, of Jesus. And we have to fast forward into the passion narratives. So start with me at the Gospel of Mark. And I want you to go to Mark 15 at verse 40. So Mark 15 at verse 40. There were also women looking on from a distance among them. Now, okay, context, crucifixion. There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were, first person listed, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, the younger, and of Joses and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee. And there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. Oh my gosh, could I tell you a whole sermon could be preached on that one last line? Look at it again, verse 41. The women that were just listed there, used to follow Jesus and provided for him when he was in Galilee. And this last little line, and there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. Hello, there were lots of women disciples, friends. Expand our minds and hearts. Okay, well, we are just getting started. Then if you go down with your eyeballs to verse 47 of Mark, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joses, saw where the body was laid. Yeah, so she was kind of a witness all the way to the very end, to the burial. And then in Mark's gospel, if you zip ahead to 16, verse 1, you find, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. Okay, so those are your Gospel of Mark references. So again, let's press on and go back to Matthew. So Matthew 27. Let's go there for a minute and see what we see. Matthew 27, starting at verse 56. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Okay, so context, the betrayal and arrest of Jesus. And I just wanted to throw that little scrap in there that all the guys, hello, they deserted Jesus and fled. This is not bashing on men time. I mean, it's just, again, you get where I'm going, right? Okay, so that's verse 56. And then if you look at same chapter 27, but at verse 61, so we've got some false witnesses coming forward. At last, two came forward, and then verse 61, and said, "This fellow said, I am going to destroy the temple of God and build it up in 3 days." Let's see. And then, I'm not sure where I was going with that. Let's look at 28, verse 1. There's so many references here, I think I'm tripping on them a little bit. Oh, I see where I was going. Actually, I was looking at 27, verse 61. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there sitting opposite the tomb. So again, point being, she's there to the very end, or at least what we think is the very end. And then at verse 28, chapter 28, verse 1, after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. So again, we have this consistent pattern. That's what I'm wanting you to see, that Mary is there with other women to the very end of Jesus when he breathed his last. And then they are also there on the day of resurrection. Okay.
To anoint the body. Yes.
To anoint the body. Yes, exactly. Let's look at Luke 24. Verses 1 through 10. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here. He is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners, must be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all of this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now the 11, now 11, not 12 any longer. Judas is out of the picture. So they go back to the disciples. In verse 10, now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other woman with them who told this to the apostles. Verse 11, but these words seemed to them, to the men, an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb, stooping and looking in. He saw linen clothes by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened. Okay. So all of this is buildup. I want you to see simple things. Presence of Mary at the death of Jesus, crucifixion. She's there on resurrection morning. According to Luke's account, she actually tells the tale and is not believed along with the other women. But probably the number one point I want you to get out of this is repetition. All four Gospels bear witness to Mary Magdalene. She's an important figure, friends. It speaks to her importance in the early Christian church as well, in the early Christian community. Okay, phew. We've just dashed through the Gospels, but now we get to go to our passage with that background. So go with me to our passage for today, John 19, and we're starting at verse 25. So 25 through 27, and then we'll hop over to chapter 20 and look at some verses there. But first, John 19, 25 to 27. So we're in the context of the crucifixion of Jesus again. And there's the division of the casting of lots for the clothing. And that is what the soldiers did. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. There's Mary again. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved, whom we suspect is John, standing beside her, Jesus said to his mother, "Mother, here is your son." Okay. Then verse 27. Then Jesus said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. Then skip with me over to chapter 20, and let's start at verse 1. And we'll look at the first two verses. So Jesus, crucified, dead, buried, and now is resurrection morning in chapter 20, verse 1. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. Hint, hint, it's John. And said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Okay, then jump down with me to verse 11. What happens in between, of course, is that Peter and John run to the tomb and they look inside and so forth and so on. And we're told that they believe something, but we're not told what they believe. But the thing that's so interesting is verse 10. Then the disciples returned to their homes. So what really happened there? Okay, let's pick up the story at verse 11. But Mary remained. She stood outside weeping, outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head, the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. That's the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. All right. So, and you can, if you want, you can unmute for this, any of you that want to answer. But what I want to ask you is, as you heard that read and just scan that little passage I just read, what was repeated or what stood out to you as being significant? Something that was repeated or something that was particularly evocative? Just jump in and say what you want to say.
Crying.
Yeah, weeping. Did you notice how many times? Man, it's like repeated multiple times. And in fact, the same question from the angels and from the mouth of Jesus. Why, woman, why are you weeping? And she stood outside of the tomb weeping. Okay, that's significant. What else? Anything else that you see that is particularly evocative or repeated?
Her persistence.
Yeah, indeed. Her persistence, that she remained and the others left. Mm-hmm. What else?
That's what I was going to.
Yeah. She was always there.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
She just didn't want to leave him.
Yes.
And also that she kept being sent to go tell the men what was going on, even though she hardly ever was believed. Yeah.
So in that way, she's the first apostle. Even
Indeed.
though
Yeah.
didn't
She was
count
their
as
leader. She was
She was
really their leader.
the first preacher,
One who
friends.
got it.
Yeah,
First woman preacher.
right on. So the other thing I want you to notice, though, go back to the beginning of verse 1 and 2, because that's significant. I didn't point out. I wanted you to start there as well.
1 and 2 in what chapter?
20, right where we were reading. Early on the first day of the week, while it was what?
Dark.
dark.
Still dark. Still dark. Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. It's dawn, right? So it's still that kind of twilighty time, but it's a specific reference to the fact that from all intents and purposes for us as the reader and the hearer of the gospel, it's still dark because Jesus is still dead. Yeah. So the gospel writer wants us to dwell in what Mary was dwelling in, which is the darkness. And that's how our narrative begins, is in darkness. Darkness in the scriptures, of course, dark and light are clear images that we bump into again and again and again. But really, in this context, darkness, it depicts sadness, sorrow, hopelessness. It can mean evil, can often refer, well, think about it this way. We often refer to people as being, oh, he or she is in a dark place, right? What do we mean by that? Well, it can mean that they are really anxious, that they're sorrowing or in distress. But, I think most of us can relate, can't we? Haven't we all had times in our life that we would now look back on and say, wow, that was a dark place. And maybe over these last 18 plus months, you've known some dark places during this pandemic. So we wonder, okay, what drove Mary Magdalene to the tomb? Was it just the functional anointing of the body with spices? Yeah, that's probably part of it. But Have you ever noticed, and maybe you've noticed this in yourself, that when you're in a sorrowing place, you often feel so helpless and you need to do something? You ever noticed how people, especially women, busy themselves at the time of death, whether it's cooking or cleaning or caring? She needed something to direct her sorrow toward her dark place. She had to do something, and there was this functional task. Now, the main reason the dead body was anointed with spices, let's be clear about that, was to control the smell of decomposition. Jews did not practice embalming, and the funeral spices were a way to minimize unpleasant odors. So the women, the only reason I dwell on that for a moment is to make the point that the women really believed Jesus was dead. Now, Jesus has borne witness to the contrary, that on the third day, and yet they're in a sorrowing place, a dark place. They believe that Jesus is dead. So they make their way to the tomb and find it empty. Can you imagine the shock? They saw Jesus laid in the tomb, and the tomb closed, and now it's empty. There's only one explanation, right? Somebody has stolen the body. So she ran and got Peter and the one Jesus loved, aka John, and they saw and believed, the scriptures tell us. Well, what did they see and believe? We don't know. We're not sure, but what we do know is that they make their way back to where they came from. And the one who remains is Mary. Why? Well, on the one hand, she may not have known what else to do. On the other hand, she probably wanted to find Jesus's body. It only seemed respectful. Get Jesus's body back to where it belonged. Sorrow. She is experiencing sorrow, not just in the death of Jesus. She's experiencing sorrow in the death of her dreams. Everything we've accentuated so far tells us about Mary that she was a serious, sincere follower of Jesus. She had cast her lot with Jesus. And that dream of being Jesus's disciple in her mind and heart is over. We all know what it feels like to have a dream that we have really invested ourselves into die. That's a dark place. She has experienced the death of her dreams for her future. Notice this emphasis, as I said again, on weeping or wept. Why are you weeping? This word weeping is really an unusual word, and you think, oh, weeping's not unusual, but the word in the Greek is unusual. You got to take my word for it. It's only used one other time. It's a word that refers to sobbing. It's not just, tears trickling down. This is like, kind of body shuddering, sobbing, wailing. And the emphasis is on audible wailing, helplessness, brokenness, despair. There's only one other instance of this word, and it's in John's Gospel as well. So I want you to stick your finger in chapter 20, because we're coming back there, but go back with me to chapter 16 of John's Gospel, and we'll find the other instance where this very unusual, rare word for weeping is used. Chapter 16 and verse 20. Jesus is speaking here, and Jesus says, "Very truly, I tell you, you will weep." There's our word. You will weep and mourn, but the world will rejoice. You will have pain, but your pain will turn into joy. Jesus is speaking of what is to come. There will be sorrow, there will be weeping, there will be pain, but then, just as resolutely, there will be joy. And this word for weeping, that's the only other place where it's used. Joy is about to break in on sorrow. This is the gospel writer's way of tipping his hand. Hey, weeping, yeah, but joy is coming. And then there's this interesting exchange of what are you, or whom are you looking for? Let it not be lost on you. Some of you may obscurely remember that in John's gospel, we've heard a variation of this question before. Again, stick a finger and go back to John chapter 1, verse 38, very beginning of Jesus's ministry. And do you remember that whole vignette where John's disciples decide to cast their lot with Jesus, but they have to kind of check it out first? Well, if you look at John chapter 1, verse 38, so you've got two of John the Baptist's disciples. And in verse 38, when Jesus turned and saw them, in other words, two of John the Baptist's disciples following him, he said to them, "What are you looking for?" Same construction as what we just saw in the latter part of John's gospel. They said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher, "where are you staying? Where are you abiding?" Literally. Jesus said to them, "Come and see." And they came and saw where he was staying, and they remained with him that day. And they are convinced that they have found the Messiah, and they go back and tell others. And then if you pick it up in verse 43, the next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." So do you see the pattern? What are you looking for? Come and see. Follow me. You have the same pattern playing out here in the latter part of John's gospel. So if you look at John 20 again now, Jesus asks her in verse 15, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" It's no longer what are you looking for. Now it is whom are you looking for? See, Jesus wants her to come and see me and follow me. Continue as my disciple. Something new is about to happen. So we've had two indications of that. Weeping is going to turn into joy. Whom are you looking for? I'm right in front of you. Come to me and follow me. And finally, there's another indication that something new and something joyous is about to happen. This is the third of three references in what we call the Passion narrative in John's Gospel to a garden. Did you notice that? 3 references to a garden. You notice that in verse 15 of chapter 20, Mary Magdalene is mistaken in thinking that Jesus is a gardener. Capital G, by the way. But let's go back just a few chapters and see the first of the 3 references and see the repetition of garden and gardener. So look at chapter 18 of John's Gospel, verse 1. After Jesus had spoken these words, so Last Supper time, friends, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered, and there they prayed. Garden of Gethsemane, yeah. But then there's another reference in chapter 19 to a garden. Look with me at chapter 19 at verse 41. Well, actually, back up to verse 43. So we've got Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, who are going to be burying the body of Jesus after his crucifixion. Verse 40, they took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices and linen cloths, according to the burial custom of the Jews. Verse 41, now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a tomb in which no one had ever been laid. And then finally, we encounter in chapter 20, the resurrected gardener. Friends, this is not happenstance. The idea of the garden, let's think about it biblically speaking. Where do we first get introduced to the garden? Hint, hint, Genesis. Yeah. Genesis created a garden for the first humans, and they were expelled from that garden in sin and shame and sorrow, right? Well, Jesus in his rising will reverse that curse, will reverse the curse of sin and sorrow. Because, friends, it is resurrection morning, the morning of the new creation, the morning where night and darkness turn to day, to morning, sadness and sorrow to rejoicing. Ah, so great. But then the greatest of all, the gardener, Jesus, calls Mary by name, Mary. She doesn't recognize him. Why? We think that's kind of weird. Well, have you ever had a really good cry? It's kind of hard to see straight when you've had a really good cry. For whatever reason, her view of Jesus was obscured, but when he called her name, everything fell into place. And that should not surprise us. Again, if we go back to John's Gospel, chapter 10, a passage we've studied before, my friends, remember John 10, verse 3? The gatekeeper, remember in the I Am study? The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep, what? By name, and leads them out. Well, Mary is called by name, and Jesus is leading her out of her sorrow, out of everything that was dark and sad, and leading her into light and rejoicing. He leads us in the same way, does he not? When we are in our time of sorrow and sadness, he calls us by name and leads us out of darkness into light. But it's not an option for Mary to stay where she has been. We see that as she clings to Jesus, and he says to her, don't hold on to me. Don't hold on to me. And it's not that he's being rude or curt. No, he has a job for her. Don't hold on to me. You can't hold on to the past. There's something I'm calling you to. Again, remember, Jesus has said, whom are you looking for? Come and see. Follow me. He sends Mary out of the garden into a new future, rejoicing. He sends her out for a purpose, to testify. And her testimony is that 4-word sermon, the first Christian sermon ever preached. I have seen the Lord. Whom do you seek? She saw Jesus, the one who called her by name, who led her out of sorrow into light, into rejoicing. And then he sent her. He sent her to tell yet others. And friends, that's what Jesus does for us too. He comes into our sadness and sorrow and doesn't chide us for that. No, he delivers us. He leads us out of that. And then he sends us into a new future, a new creation, to testify to what we've seen, what we've heard. I gave you some artwork, of course. You know me, I gotta have a little artwork. There's some beautiful artwork that one from, if you look at your 3 paintings, Harold Copping from 1910. Doesn't he capture Mary's sorrow? Oh my gosh. That one called out to me. That just so speaks of sorrow. The second one is from Seeger Coder, my favorite German painter. Again, you can't really make it out so well, but there she is among the tombs, and she's at Jesus's tomb in front of it, looking. She's sorrowing. What am I to do now? But then the last one, this is an altar piece from Germany, and it's called Putting Death to Death. And it's a beautiful altar piece. And what you can really see, whether you have it in color or even in black and white, is the light. And she's Can you tell she's shielding her eyes from the light of Christ? It's brilliant. It's so bright. What you can't really make out is some of the symbolism. I've told you before that Sigurd Koder always embeds images in his paintings that are his sermon, what he wants to preach. The grave markers, if you look really carefully, you have to get your magnifying glass out later. The grave markers have 1914 to 1918. Of course, we know that's the First World War. 1939 to 1945, Second World War, in which Sigurd Koder fought for the German army. You have also embedded in here, and you have to look for it carefully, but there are the words Vietnam, Biafra, which was, as you remember, the Nigerian Civil War at the time he painted this. Then you have some Hebrew markings on some of the tombstones. Adam, Eve in Hebrew, the wise, the foolish. Basically, the idea is that death has been put to death. And Mary shields her eyes from the brilliance of the risen Jesus, who is banishing sorrow, casting out sorrow. And the red poppies that are, if you're looking at this in color, that are in this garden that Sigurd Koder has painted, symbolize suffering. And suffering is dead. It is being left behind because Jesus is making all things new. It's obviously the new garden, the new creation. Beautiful painting. One last thing, you know, it couldn't be a Robin teaching without a couple of paintings, and I got to leave you with a sonnet, my poetry. So this one is, you'll remember one of my favorite poets and writers, Anglican priest Malcolm Guite. This is from Sounding the Seasons, 70 Sonnets for the Christian Year. That's what it looks like. And this one is entitled Easter Dawn, and I think he nails it. This is our text. This is what we just read. And so I read it to you. Easter Dawn. He blesses every love which weeps and grieves, and now he blesses hers who stood and wept and would not be consoled or leave her love's last touching place, but watched as low light crept up from the east. A sound behind her stirs a scatter of bright bird song through the air. She turns, but cannot focus through her tears or recognize the gardener standing there. She hardly hears his gentle question, "Why? Why are you weeping?" Or sees the play of light that brightens as she chokes out her reply. They took my love away, my day is night. And then she hears her name. She hears love say, the word that turns her night and ours today. So beautiful. Sorry, I can't hear that without rejoicing. So, friends, that's all I got. That's all I got.